Chiropractor, I believe we have the profound ability to impact our communities and people's health on a global level, while also enjoying rich and rewarding personal lives and giving attention to the things that matter to us. Each week, you'll hear an inspiring conversation to give you ideas and insights to rock your practice, pursue your passions, find more connection and meaning in your life, and create a life and business that works for you. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Rockstar Doctor Life. I am excited, as always, when I'm in production mode because I get to have these really interesting and fun conversations, and you get to listen in and hear from some of these amazing people in chiropractic. So today we've got a little teeny bit of a challenge technology-wise. Hopefully everything will go all right. My guest, Dr. Shara Downey, is in Singapore. This is probably the farthest distance guest that I've had the honor of connecting with. Welcome to the show, Shara.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
We're going to try to just get through this so that this call doesn't drop again. But why don't you just start out by telling everyone where you're practicing, what's going on with your family. Some exciting things have just happened within your family, but I'll let you tell everyone that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I practice in Singapore, but as you can tell, I am Canadian. I have a great Canadian accent. I've been here 13 years, started 2 practices, helped 3 other doctors start their practices, and now as a mom of 3 and as of 6 weeks ago, mom of 4, I am now part-time practicing in another practice that I've just started as well.
Busy, busy lady.
Yes.
Yes. So, I mean, so many things I want to talk to you about. But the first question I have is, what took you to Singapore?
I was looking for adventure. So I went to CMCC in Toronto, and I always knew I wanted to travel a little bit after school, and looked kind of in the States and a little bit further to Australia and in England. And I thought, well, they're a little bit too much like Canada. So I just kept looking east and found Malaysia and Singapore opportunities and came here. And it was supposed to be 2 years. So I signed the contract and was super excited. And then I just didn't leave.
And 13 years later, you're quite settled there. And so then did you always have the vision of running multiple practices or helping? So do you currently run all those 3 practices, or you just help get them off the ground and then other docs take over?
I'm currently in the 3rd, which I'm running. And then the other 2, I got them off the ground. And then the primary principal doctors have now taken over.
So you love starting new things.
Yeah, it keeps me from getting bored.
Yeah. Well, clearly you must have some strengths in building a practice and in seeing all the different pieces that need to come together. Are there a few things that come to mind right now for you? Just because so many docs listening may be in that position, right? They're ready to start their own practice or take a leap and jump in and do something new. What would be your advice about starting a practice? What have you found has been the best for you?
Oh gosh, so many things, but initially it was kind of by necessity, right? Like necessity becomes your mother of invention. My work contract was up and I didn't want to leave the country, so we started kind of on a wing and a prayer, and it worked. And but then from there you realize there's strengths and weaknesses in starting any business, and I took a lot of time to learn outside of chiropractic, also inside of chiropractic. And what I found, I think the biggest thing is to keep open to learning and new things. I think a lot of times when we come out of school, we're so locked into what we know or what we don't know and what will work. Or maybe even being in practice, even 2, 3, 4, even 10 years, and you think you've kind of got it down, and then you don't keep yourself open to new opportunities, new things, either mentors or new ways of doing things. And that's always helped me really shape and mold and grow, because your practice will get super stagnant if you're not looking for how to kind of keep going forward.
That's so interesting is literally before we got on this call this morning, I was reading this Brendon Bouchard's book, what's the book? The High Performance Habits. And what I read was this paragraph about certainty being the killer for people, which kind of it kind of caught me off guard, because I thought, well, we always talk about being so certain in practice, right? But the exact same comment was like, if you are so certain, then you're not open to new ideas, and you make yourself you can get really dogmatic in your thinking. And sometimes the best entrepreneurs and even the best chiropractors are willing to also open up their eyes and entertain at least other ideas and then see how they resonate, rather than just stay fixed on one belief system. Now, I'm not saying you should completely change your practice style, listeners, but I'm just saying be open to the ideas of all the different guests, of people's experience, because you just never know what you might take that might help you move forward in some dimension in your life.
Absolutely. And I find, like, I don't care if you're 2 years into practice or you've been practicing for 50 years, there's going to be value in everything, that people know and understand because they've had a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
So what I had an interesting experience a couple of, let's say 6 or 8 months ago. I was speaking with a young doc and she was starting a practice and had no regard for anyone who had already been practicing. For her, because she was new and it was a new practice, she was very fixed in what she wanted, even to the point of maternity, and she was years away from having kids. And it was, I had an outer body experience because I literally was sitting there thinking, I have 3 children that I've worked up until week 40 in my practice, and I'm having my fourth, and yet none of that is valuable for you. And
Yeah.
it was just a shocking experience. And so I just thought, I hope she's successful, and I look forward to hearing good things for her. But you just can't be that closed off.
No, and and like you said earlier, everyone has their experiences that get them to where they're at right now, right? And certainly you had planned on having a family. The timing of things, we don't plan a lot of these things in our lives. They just happen for us, right? They happen divinely
Yes.
for us. And sometimes we go, "What the heck? How the heck am I going to get through this?" But you do, and then you learn something through that afterwards as well.
Well, my assistant, who was, well, two of them actually, my clinic manager and my assistant, both have been with me for over 8 years, and both unequivocally commented the minute I had my first son, I became a much more patient doctor, more patient with staff, more patient with patients, more compassionate, more understanding. Like, they saw the change with me having children, even
Right.
though I didn't necessarily see it, right? So, yeah, I mean, other people can see that as well.
Right. I mean, that's a question that I love to ask docs. I mean, so you've been in practice 13 years, sorry. And how old is your oldest child?
7.
7. So you had 6 years of practice, then you became a mom. And
Yeah.
how did you manage life? Because everything changes, right? I'm sure you were probably nursing and wanting to be with your baby. And how did you manage that as a woman, a working woman?
Well, I mean, I fulfilled my dream. So I brought my home to my practice, meaning I didn't live far enough away to commute. I worked 5-minute walk away. I made sure that all my babies were in the clinic with me daily until they could crawl, so I could feed between patients. And even now, my 6-week-old comes to the clinic. I have a nanny that's there with him, and he hangs out and has fun, and the patients get to know them. And then I've got my kids crawling around fit bars
Right.
on the floor. So, but I knew that's what I wanted. So I really set that up initially, and I set my patient treatment times around it and my staff around it. So any staff that wasn't on board with that, it was a growing experience. So that was maybe a time for them to move on. But that was something I knew I wanted, that the kids had to be incorporated into the practice.
Right. And so I love that you shared that, because something that we always talk about on the show is creating your business to reflect your lifestyle and what you want for your family, not letting your business run your family. Right. So you clearly,
Yes.
what you're saying is, before you had your child or your first one, did you have your office hours when you got your office up and running? You had a lot of things in place with the vision of, this is what it's going to look like when a little person comes into the world? Or did you set it up so that you adapted when your child arrived? You know what I mean? Like, did you have things in place
Yeah.
that were good to go from the beginning, or did you just evolve? Probably
A
both,
little
now that
bit
I
of,
think about it.
yeah. Yeah, a little bit of both. I mean, those first 6 years was nose to the grindstone, right? We worked 80, 90 hours a week. We're there late. We're there getting things going. And I brought on an associate probably 9 months before I gave birth, not with the intention of giving birth, but just to get the practice to be supported with this other person in the event that someday I was going to take leave. And it worked really well. So she was able to take the bulk of the work when I went on maternity, and I was then returned after my first son at halftime for a year. So I didn't
Right.
even have to come back full time. And so it worked out really perfectly. So, she did leave after 4 years, and then the second child came earlier than expected. So we weren't quite as set up. And, as I like to say, number 3 was a surprise and number 4 was a shock. So, but we just kind of adapted in those situations.
Yeah, that's just how we all need to keep rolling, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
you keep dealing with the curves. Now, did you ever have anything that took you out of practice? Like anything that was a challenge for you physically? Like, I mean, you were pregnant, but your pregnancy sounded like they were great. Any injuries, challenges in your personal life? Docs deal with all kinds of things that can sometimes railroad us off the tracks within our practice and our business life. Anything like that that's come up for you? And how did you get through it?
Um, no, yeah, thanks for asking. I don't see it taking me away from the practice. It actually threw me further into the practice, meaning being overseas and not in your home country. If you're not working, you don't have family here, you don't have that support, you don't have anything social services wise to look after you. So like if you don't work, you don't earn a living, you can't live, and you're in a country that you don't know anybody really. So you kind of have to work more in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so
So
work becomes your salvation in a way.
in a way, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So if there were, I can't think of any specific challenge, but there were times over the years that, yeah, I definitely dove into work more and was really connecting with patients more, and not to save me, but more to get out of myself, to realize that there are other people and other situations out there I can be helping, that my current circumstance at the time wasn't as big or as poor as I thought it was.
Yeah.
So by helping others, it really got me out of my own head and my poor me syndrome, if you will.
Yeah, that's always something that I found her too when I was going through difficult times in my life, whether it was, going through divorce or rebuilding my practice and single mom life.
Yeah.
It was always when I was in my practice or finding ways to reach out and just do something kind, whether I was volunteering in different things, that gave me that sense of purpose and the fulfillment and helped me get through difficult things too. So thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that. What do you really like? Tell us about what practice is like in Singapore. Like, what's the climate
Well,
like there for chiropractic?
it's interesting. When I first came here, I would say it was really like the Wild West. Anything goes. And chiropractic was so new. I think it had only been here for maybe 5 to 10 years. And there literally was like 10 chiropractors in a
Wow.
city of like 5 million people. And because of mindset here, we're part of Asia, so there's a very close knit tie to traditional Chinese medicine and alternative medicine versus Western medicine. The concept of chiropractic wasn't such a leap. They still had to have a lot of education, but the fact that it wasn't traditional medicine wasn't a leap. So that part made it really easy. But then on the same token, you had people here doing completely crazy things on all spectrums of chiropractic and alternative medicine. So we kind of all got lumped into one. And then as it got a bit busier and more people came in and, more regulated, then you really had to start separating yourselves from others, because now people have seen the good, the bad, the ugly, right?
Right. So obviously when you first got there, was it regulated?
No, no. And even to this day, we still have a bit more self-regulation than government regulation, because they kind of don't know where to put us.
Right.
So as long as you're licensed in a reputable country, i.e. Canada, US, Australia, the UK, and then you're welcome to practice here. But we don't have any boards or anything specific to Singapore that we have to pass.
Right. And so what's the community like? Do you have a lot of you are the only chiropractor that I know in Singapore. And I'm sure there's lots of other great chiropractors there. So do you
Yeah.
guys have associations? Do you have, get gatherings? How do you stay connected,
Well,
right? Like within chiropractic?
yeah, no, that's a really good question. Thanks for asking. I find that the most difficult part, actually, because initially I was one of 4 women. And, if there was any challenge, I would ask any of my colleagues, and like the common answer is, oh, just figure it out. Okay.
Thanks.
you know,
Appreciate that.
yeah. Thanks so much. So that was one challenge. And then what happened was some of these big box chains would bring in 4 or 5 doctors to one location, and then after their 2-year contract's up, all of those guys go out and start a new practice. So it kind of really chia pet, if you will, or flourished like massively after that. And then people really stick to themselves. There's a couple of associations. One's a bit more subluxation based, one's more evidence based. They fight like crazy. There's not a lot of camaraderie, so I find I'm going out of the country for that.
Right.
And that actually led me to my newest pet projects. I have a program called the Women Wellness Warriors,
Yeah.
and I've connected female chiropractors from Hong Kong, Thailand, Australia, kind of Asia Pac area,
Yeah.
because we need that camaraderie. We need that ability to connect and really speak with each other and further our practices and get together with challenges. And I do sometimes feel like I'm alone.
Yeah. That's fantastic that you've initiated that. And I'm sure that there's many women that are benefiting as well. I mean, technology is great, right? I mean, people can listen to the
Yeah.
podcast, you can watch videos, and you can get connected and feel a little less alone than that was the case, 20 years ago. We were all listening to On
Mm-hmm.
Purpose back then, right?
Yeah.
But it's still, nothing takes the place of being in the company of people who are like-minded that really you can lean on and that can share advice and make you feel like the challenges you're experiencing you're not the only one.
Yeah, exactly. And there are a few, subtle cultural differences that we need to work through here. Singapore is probably the most Western Asian country. So in that respect, it was easy to start practice here,
Yeah.
but it's still Asia.
Right.
So there's a lot of cultural things that you have to really consider and go through. Like, for example, I just went back to work after 4 weeks. Well, that's unheard of. Like, they're in
Right.
complete shock. Most of them are in what they call confinement. They're not allowed to leave their house. They have certain foods they have to eat. So the idea to go back to work so quickly just shocked them.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever have, I mean, it sounds like obviously you're quite settled there now. Do you have any longings to come back to Canada or North America or to relocate anywhere else, given that you do have that sense of adventure within yourself?
Well, we looked at going to Australia a couple of years ago, and with the kids having come on, this is their life, this is their home. So
Right.
although they're Canadian, I mean, my son's in grade 1. He goes to a local school. If you close your eyes, you wouldn't know he's Canadian. He has such a Singaporean accent. And so for us, we are willing to do these adventures short term, i.e. like 2 or 3 months.
Right.
But for a long term, like resettling or moving, probably that time has changed now because of the kids.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you stay, so inspired, given the challenges, given the lack of camaraderie, given the lack of communication that you might be feeling right in Singapore, how do you keep yourself engaged and fired up as a chiropractor? Are there resources that you're constantly using, or trainings that you've done, or mentorship that you've experienced?
All of the above, actually.
Good.
Yeah, I have mentors, 2 or 3 coaches I work with in different areas at a time, and I like to really get to at least 2 or 3 seminars a year. Usually Australia because it's closer. I try to hit the U.S. once a year, just to really keep connected. And interestingly enough, then you get your own network. So people are, we're doing mastermind calls once a week, and I've got a couple of docs in Canada, a couple in the UK, and then Australia, and we on the Skype call once a week. So it's funny for time zones, but most of the time we do get connected in that regard.
Yeah, great. So, my other question obviously is, okay, mother of 4, how do you manage your time now, right? You're not working 80 to 90 hours a week like you were your first 6 years of practice. So how do you shift gears from Dr. Shara to mom? Do you have anything that specifically is a ritual or a headspace, or are you just on all the time?
That's a good question. I'm probably more organized. I organize myself more than I ever thought I would. I was a very free spirit. I was adventurous. I love to do everything spontaneous. But if I did that now, I think I would absolutely combust. So, I organize my time in the sense of I look forward to the week, to the month, forecast what I need to get done, and know where in the month it has to be done. But I'm not so rigid. It has to be on this day and time, because with 4 kids, you have to have some fluidity. And as long as I've got time, I date all of my kids. I know that sounds funny, but I date them individually.
Yeah, no, that's important.
Yeah. So I've got my time that we date, and then I make sure that I've got 2 or 3 hours per day set for my marketing for the clinic, set for my work with the Women Warrior Wellness. And then from there, anything else I can fit in, great. But as long as I know I've got those things completed, in a way, it's like my own inner checklist is satisfied. So I'm not stressing out when I'm with the kids that I'm missing something.
Right.
And then when I'm working that I'm missing the kids. So that's the way I kind of manage it. So I know at least I can feel like calm, present with whichever project I'm doing at the time.
Mm-hmm. And what about taking care of you physically? I mean, you just gave birth 6 weeks ago, right? Like, we know what that's like on your body physically, right? So how do you take care of your emotional and physical health with everything else that you have going on? Are there certain things that you find are, you would never give up? Like, they're just so crucial for your mental and emotional health and your physical health?
Yeah, I meditate daily. I do yoga daily, and nothing extravagant or anything, but it's like my 25 minutes of me time to just keep my body moving as well. Like I thought today's interview was so appropriate because it's actually my birthday, and I'm going to say this, but I'm 45 and, and I have a 6-week-old baby, and I need to stay limber and flexible and feeling good in my body. So yeah, if I don't move daily, there's a problem.
Yeah, you know what? And happy birthday. I did see that this morning on Facebook that it was your, and I was like, oh, whoa, I get to talk to her today. So wishing you a great 45th birthday and many more to come for sure.
Thank you. But yeah, so I meditate and I move daily. I try and keep a really good alkaline sort of keto type of diet. I'm not super strict, but just enough to make myself feel good.
Yeah.
And those are the things I really don't compromise on.
Yeah. Do you think that your definition of what you've expected for yourself has changed in the 13 years? Like the things that you would challenge yourself with, how you define success? Like, have you evolved and shifted your expectations of your lifestyle with your children? Or would you say you're living exactly the life that you expected you would be?
In some respects, I'm living more. There's more things fulfilled than I expected that I didn't even envision. Obviously, there's still things I want to accomplish and moving forward, or I'm working on those. But I would say definition of success has changed slightly in the sense that for me, it's meaningful connections and relationships within my family, with my, coworkers, colleagues in the industry, and then the ability to actually get out a message that's so important to me, which is obviously chiropractic and natural healing and living, that I'm still on that mission. And so that mission hasn't died down or changed. It's just increasing with its power, if you will. And so, I've worked through that mission with many practices, and now I'm going forward and working with it on a bigger scale. So, doing more speaking and working with these women in this group. So in that sense, it's really keeping me fired up.
And when you are doing, I know you do some coaching as well, and you're speaking with these women, the warriors, what are some of the biggest challenges that you're observing the docs are facing? And then what is your advice for them to get through it?
Oh, it's a great question. I think one of the things you just mentioned is probably the biggest one, but having your own definition of success.
Yes.
And knowing when you've actually reached it or a portion of it, because so often we're kind of chasing that rabbit that's running ahead of us. And if you never really have a definition or when you've actually reached it, you're never stopping. And that becomes unfulfilling very quickly.
You stop to look back, you forget to look back and think about how far you've come and be grateful for that journey that you've been on.
Yeah, you don't enjoy what you've actually accomplished because you're just still going on to the next thing.
Yeah. When you are looking for associates and you've had them, in your practice, what are some of the tips you would give people? Because I know that's a situation that I think is really great for a lot of people. Some people are really great at being an associate. It's what fits for their lifestyle. It fits for who they are as a person. But there needs to be certain ways that the relationship, works together. So do you have any suggestions for people either looking to hire an associate and for the associates looking to join a practice?
I think if you're going to be hiring, it's important to look at the actual values that the person that you're going to hire, what their value ladder is. Because so many times I've seen people they get along, their vision's great, like they both are down the same road, whether it's pregnancy chiropractic or sports or what have you, and they get along excellently, but somehow they have a different value ladder, and then there's a mismatch of expectation, whether said or unsaid. And of course that leads to resentment, and even if you don't know why, there's just this feeling of being off, out of sync. And that's almost worse than having a full-blown disagreement, because then you go along for a long time and you've got two people in mismatch, right? Like they're not in rapport. And then all of a sudden you, a year later, realize, okay, this practice has gone down because we haven't actually gotten our stuff together. So
it's almost like a relationship, right? It's like a marriage. Like at times, like if you're not in sync and your values change over the years, then you can't really put your finger on what's missing, but there's something that's not there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, continue.
And so but that's what I would say to the person hiring. It isn't always the person who looks best on paper or says the right things. You actually need to dig a bit deeper to what's their true motivation and what they value, because then you'll know how to incentivize them so that they're actually going to work for your practice, not leech off of you, if you will.
Yep.
And that they're going to help you grow this vision together, and they have a piece of that vision themselves. So then if you're the associate, I think it's also important to find out what your principal is looking for, like what they look at for success in their associate, what they define success as, what their measurements are.
Right.
Because if you can't live up to it or don't even believe in it, doesn't matter how beautiful the practice is or how much money they're going to pay you, you won't be successful there.
Yeah. So basically, if I were to summarize what you just said, it's looking at your values and really getting
Yeah.
clear on what your values are, not only as a human being, but also for your business life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'll actually
Yeah.
drop in a link, listeners. I did do a specific show on values specifically and how to get clear on them, and it's on one of the earlier shows. But I'll drop a link in case it helps any of you. So my last question for you, because I know we're going to run out of time here, and you probably want to get to bed, actually, is, you've had this sense of adventure. You've taken a huge risk. You pick up your life from Canada, you go across the world, rather,
Yeah.
and start a whole new life. That for a lot of people would seem like an incredible risk. And to me, I love it. It's an adventure, and I love adventure and freedom, probably the same way that you do. How did you, what's the advice that you would give people to take risks, to try something new, to go for something that they think they might want, but they're holding back because they're scared?
Well, just like in any financial situation, it depends on your risk management. And also your level of risk, right? Whether you're going to do a guaranteed bond or, a high risk in a trade.
Right.
What I would recommend to most people is kind of keep a touchstone. Keep one thing in your life that is the same or consistent, that isn't changing.
Right.
If you're someone that really is scared of risk or change, then keep 3 or 4 things that are the same. Like change one thing only versus a lot. The time I moved to Singapore, I was just newly separated and then became divorced. So I was single. I came here on my own where I expected to have a partner. Like all of these things were happening at the same time that I'm in a new country where I don't speak the language. And oh, by the way, I have a new job. So let's just add all of these wonderful things together. So,
yeah.
But that fuels me. I love that. Where that would probably cause some people to have a nervous breakdown. So I would recommend, just depending on yourself, and you have to know yourself.
Yeah.
Pick one thing new that freaks you out and do it.
Yeah, and I think that there is a certain amount of fearlessness that is innate, right? Like some people are naturally just a little more. They like the adrenaline. They like taking risks. They're okay putting themselves out there, even if it's scary. And then there's a part of it that can certainly be nurtured within us, right? And you can develop you can develop fearlessness, I think, too, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's like anything, the more you do it, whether you take a small step or a big step, then you get better at, it's like every time you fall, you get better at getting back up, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, nothing is ever permanent. So whatever decision you make, nothing's permanent. You can always undo it. You can always change. You can always leave. You can always do whatever, right? So.
Right. Yeah, actually, one of my good friends says, the thing is you always reserve the right to change your mind, right?
Exactly.
So we think that, you're going to make a decision, you're stuck with that. No, actually, you can change your mind and reroute your life and do a course correct, whatever you want to call it, at any given time, depending on what happens, right? You go through divorce, you have a new child, you realize that your practice isn't really what you wanted it to be. Maybe practice life isn't what you want it to be. There's always ways to fulfill your own dream when you continue to get clear on what it is throughout your lifetime.
Yeah. Well, and I almost broke down when I finally opened my practice, because for so long, a lot of us go to school, go to chiropractic college, like in your mind, this is the goal, this is the goal, this is the goal. And then you graduate and you're still like very young, mid-20s, early 30s, and think, now what?
Right.
I have the rest of my life to live. Now what? I've been working towards this for how long, right? So yeah.
Well, I know, and that's something this has definitely come up on the show before too. It's like, you start chasing these things, and I know that I was in that place for many years, thinking that this is what I'm supposed to want. And then I had it, or had pieces of it, and I realized, you know what? Actually, no, this isn't what I want. And then you sort of get clear and then change your whole life. I never thought I would have a home-based practice, but it has been the best thing for me, more than I would have ever expected, right? So I think what I always tell people is really try to get clear on who you are and what you want for yourself first. Yeah. And then you can figure out the how. Because if you do it the reverse way, you're going to be met with years of frustration and stress, because you're not really clear on what it is that you want.
Yeah, or you end up with a practice or business that you didn't really want to be in, but now it's so big you can't see how to get out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It has been great connecting with you. Any final thoughts that you have for docs? Like if there was one thing you'd want all chiropractors to leave this conversation with, feeling inspired, what would you say?
No matter who you are, where you are, what you do, how you practice, or what you're thinking in this moment, you will be fine.
Yes.
Because I think most people are so anxious about any moving part at any given time. And unfortunately feel like that's the part that's going to cause the breakdown of whatever they're looking to do. And you'll be fine. It'll work out. It really will work out. I spoke with a few docs over the years, and from different parts of the world. We were putting together a telesummit, and they say the same thing. It will be fine. It will work out. Patients will come to you. You will build this practice. But like you mentioned earlier, you have to know what you want.
Right. Yeah, and it's it always makes me think of a colleague of mine who said, it's everything's going to be okay in the end, and if it's not okay, there's just not the end. So it's like, yeah, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves sometimes, and sometimes you just need to sit back and take a big breath and look at things are not usually as bad as they are. And if you can find the right support, the right mentorship, the right community, you can get through different things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure connecting with you. Listeners, if you want to connect with Dr. Shara, her contact information will certainly be in the show notes. And she's certainly someone that I think you want to watch, especially if you're over in Asia, because no doubt that there's a need for greater connection of the docs over there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here today. If you like this show, please share it with another chiropractor and connect them with this message. We are always better off together than we are alone. If you haven't yet subscribed, head on over to Apple Podcasts or iTunes, and don't forget to rate and review the show while you're there. Be sure to connect with me on Instagram and Facebook, and find out more about today's guests and all things Rockstar Doctor Life by clicking in those show notes. See you next time.